An orator is a skilled public speaker, a master of words, especially in the use of words to persuade, to exhort, to inspire, to set direction, and possibly to create a vision. And words are, of course, important. Indeed, words create or destroy. They edify or humiliate. Words well spoken can uplift, can encourage, can inspire. But words are also the defining tools of nihilists, traitors, hate merchants, demagogues, and rascals of every kind. In the past few months, we have heard words intended to stoke conflict, to denigrate the ethnicities or faith of others, to divide a great people into several small and weaker parts. So oratorical genius, like all forms of genius, is not in and of itself a virtue. The character and motivations of the man or woman behind the orator is then what is crucial. Alhaji Yusuf Maitama Sule Damasanin Kano was an exceptionally gifted orator. But his greatness was not in the gift of oratory. It was in the exceptional character that undergirded that gift. He understood the power of rhetoric and persuasion. He understood drama and theater, and he translated the sometimes exasperating twists and turns of the Nigerian socio-political drama into words of rebuke and exhortation, but ultimately of hope. In one of his often quoted statements, he said, I quote, "Symptoms of revolt loom large at the horizon. In short, there is meaninglessness in philosophy, insecurity in the polity, chaos in politics, immorality in society, corruption in the economy, frustration in art, and lack of creativity in literature." End of quote. But then he was ever hopeful. And in 2012, at the award dinner of the Academy for Entrepreneurial Studies, he said, and I quote, "As we overcame all the crises in the First Republic, so we shall overcome the crisis in present Nigeria. Therefore, I have a dream that Nigeria will soon be great, that Nigeria will be a united country, a prosperous country that will take her proper place in the community of nations and will lead the rest of Africa, inspire Africans all over the world." It goes on, that will come to love one another, because the problem in Nigeria is lack of love. Our problem is tribalism and religion. Islam and Christianity teach the same moral values. End of quote. Alhaji Maitama Sule was a truly great man, and we can see that in the testimonials that followed his passing, in the caliber of the friendships and relationships that he built across Nigeria, in the quality of his thinking and writing, and especially in his simplicity and humility. This was a man for whom material comforts were never a driving force. Public service to him was never about himself. It was never about the trappings of office. It was never about wealth or privilege. Instead, it was about serving humanity and living true to his beliefs and ideals. I recall that at a meeting that I had with him, he recounted the story of how he conceded the presidential nomination of the NPN then to Alhaji Yusuf Maitama Sule. I believe the story has been told again by elder statesman Chief Edwin Clark. But what struck me about that story is the fact that, despite the fact that he could very easily have won that nomination, especially in the runoff, he chose to concede the nomination to somebody who considered older and more experienced. Anyone who can walk away from the presidential nomination of a major political party truly must be exceptional. There's something different about him. And truly there was something truly different about Maitama Sule. He believed in Nigeria, and that was one of his biggest ideals. And he was a believer until the very end. The authors of this book deserve our commendation for documenting his life and views in great detail. The importance of the task of recording and documenting history can never be overemphasized. In their prologue, the authors made a somewhat depressing observation, which I shall quote, and the author himself mentioned this, and I quote them. As we traversed the country and encountered the surviving political gladiators of the First Republic, we came upon the reality of a generation that had virtually passed on. We met old persons in various stages of mental and physical fitness. End of quote. This observation should alarm us. We must ask ourselves, who will document these important stories before the principal actors and characters pass on? I'm reminded of the African proverb that tells us that when an old person dies, it's the equivalent of a library being consumed by fire. Where are the biographers and the filmmakers who will record these things for posterity? Who will teach our children about the exploits of our Maitama Sules and about the ideals of unity and integrity and service which they modeled for us? Thankfully, this book, The Genius Orator, will help ensure that one of our most important libraries is preserved for all time. I talked about the first time I met Alhaji Maitama Sule when I was 15 years old, and I spoke about that when I visited the family in Kano. But let me close this with a story about our last interaction. He visited my office. I had persuaded him that it wouldn't be too much trouble to walk upstairs, and he kept insisting that he had all the strength and energy to do so. But anyway, that's another story. So he came and we sat for, as you can imagine, a very long time. Anyone who has interacted with Alhaji Maitama Sule knows that you cannot have a 10-minute meeting with him. But I'll forever cherish that interaction. And there's a photograph from that day. It's included in the book, in which he clasped my hands, both hands, with his hands, and he bowed respectfully. He didn't need to do that, and I told him so. And he said to me, age before beauty, just typical of a human. But that was a quintessential Maitama Sule, a great man who had no desire to demand deference or to impress people with his greatness. Nigeria is richer for his having lived and served among us, and the poorer for his passing. May his memory inspire greater greatness in those of us that he has left behind. I thank you for listening.